Earlier today, another batch of rambling remarks from Vice President Harris talking about the, quote, passage of time during a speech in Louisiana. Sure, this will keep you riveted. Take a look.
The governor and we were all doing a tour of the library here and talking about the significance of the passage of time, right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs. And there is such great significance to the passage of time when we think about a day in the life of our children.
The passage of time. Ukraine is a country in Europe, and it's next to a bigger country called Russia. And Russia invaded Ukraine, the smaller country. Meanwhile, we are also learning the vice president's office just took their 10th staffer that they lost since June. This time, the national security advisor, fueling much more speculation about internal strife and the inability of staff to work with her. Also today on Capitol Hill, confirmation hearings kicked off for Biden's Supreme Court nominee, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, where she testified in front of the Senate, saying her judicial role will be constrained by careful adherence to precedent, despite her record suggesting otherwise. Now Republicans appear poised to focus on Judge Jackson's record and her judicial philosophy instead of the smear tactics and the circus that Democrats orchestrated against Justice Kavanaugh back in 2018. With reaction to all of this, Fox News Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich. So we got Joe, the cognitive mess as president. We got Kamala Harris. It's kind of a disaster unfolding every day. And not far behind them is her own struggling cognitive mess that is Nancy Pelosi. So I don't really have a lot of confidence in the government right now, Mr. Speaker, but maybe I'm wrong. You help me out.
Well, first of all, if you want a strong reason to pray for the health of the President of the United States, you are reminded again today that that reason is the Vice President. She's not only totally incoherent, he may or may not have cognitive decline problems at his age, but at her age, she's just dumb. I mean, let's be clear. Kamala Harris may be the dumbest person ever elected Vice President in American history, and that's why people keep resigning. I mean, if you were her national security advisor and you were competent and you'd worked hard and you knew what you were doing and you watched her in Poland break up laughing when she's asked about Ukrainian refugees, you had to feel a sense of total humiliation. So I'm not surprised that that particular advisor resigned, because it's very clear that Kamala Harris should never, ever be allowed to leave the country. She probably shouldn't be allowed to leave the Naval Observatory, which is the residence of the Vice President. She is a constant danger to herself and to the rest of us.
I don't have confidence in either of them. Looking at the situation as it's unfolding in Ukraine. Now, I talked about the Reagan doctrine. I talked about the Trump doctrine. And I've talked about politicians that get us into endless wars. They start out gung-ho. They don't fight them to win the wars. They politicize the wars, and then they pull out our troops, like in Afghanistan, after how many thousands of Americans are dead and how many thousands of other Americans have incredible injuries. We can't do this anymore, Mr. Speaker, can we?
Well, look, I think there are things we can do exactly as you described earlier with Reagan, who, as you know, I worked with all throughout his 8 years as president. One, we could give the Ukrainians ship-killing missiles, which would drive the Russian fleet away from the Ukrainian coast. Two, we could give the Ukrainians cruise missiles and surface-to-surface missiles and make a clear statement. If the Russians are going to bomb civilians, we have every right to have the Ukrainians have the equipment to bomb airfields, missile sites, missile storages. That would change the game almost overnight. I think third, we ought to recognize that we need to state very clearly, this is the #1 job Joe Biden has when he goes to Europe this week. We need to state very clearly that if you start using chemical weapons, we will respond within hours. The response will be overwhelming, and you will be decisively defeated sometime in the next 48 hours after you use them. We cannot relax and allow Putin to continue to be a war criminal who thinks he can get away with anything because the American president is too timid and too cautious to do anything. And I will say also, I'm told by people who are pretty well informed that the National Security Advisor is a major problem because he keeps slowing down all the things that need to be going to Ukraine. He ought to be fired and replaced by somebody who'd actually like to defeat Putin in Ukraine, not help him win.
All right, Mr. Speaker, thank you for being with us. Appreciate it. Smart. Maybe you can be president. We need somebody. Jobs wide open. Nobody's really paying attention there or knows what they're doing. When we come back, the mob, the media facing widespread backlash after being forced to admit Hunter Biden's laptop was not a hoax. Unfortunately, most of them still are hiding and won't admit their error.